An Auckland University alumnus from the New Zealand and has been producing architecture for the past 27 years. Okay, that's architect Mustapha. And fellow member of the Malaysian Institute of Architects, Pertubuhan Architect Malaysia, and served 6 terms as PAM Council member from 1997 to 2000 and 2014 to 2017. He still sits in various PAM committees. Okay. He was also a devoted Rotarian. He is currently the committee member in the Housing and Urban Wellbeing of PAM. He is also heading the task force in the PAM Strategic Plan 2030 on architecture, cities now and future. His area of expertise is urban resilience, apart from he was a co-chair in the media and publication of PAM. He first mooted the idea of resiliency into the vocabulary of the committee urban well-being, sustainability and housing, and environmental resilience. And then a co-chair that was in charge in preparing the report for the government of Malaysia through PAM for the Kuala Krai 2014 floods, entitled Strategic Initiatives Disaster Preparedness. Okay. He was a convener of the PAM roundtable discussion with Arkinesia and the members of publication communities during the 2016 Kuala Lumpur Architectural Festival Club that deals with future communities, where the mayor of Bandung, Pak Ridwan Kamil, was the guest speaker. He too sits in the committee for KL Low Carbon Society Blueprint KL Competitive City, and also KUL Design Group in Dewan Bandaraya Kuala Lumpur. He was the curator for the yearly event of the Housing and Urbanity 2017, organized by PAM and entitled How New Urban Agenda Will Fill the Sustainable Communities Goals. So roughly that's the introductory description of our moderator. So without further ado, I would like to invite Architect Mustapha Kamal on stage. Please welcome. Thank you.
Everybody here. Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning. First of all, I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude and also thank you to ATSA Architects to appoint me as the moderator for this session, the first Putra Lecture Series on their 30th anniversary, and it's held here in University Putra Malaysia. And if you notice, all the 3 speakers and the people that I would like to moderate this afternoon are actually PAM gold medalists. The first one was in 1997, Dato Keat. The second one was in 2012, Dato Hajeedar, and the latest, current, and the first lady ever received the PAM gold medal is Lilian Tay from Veritas. So I'm actually moderating gold medalists. So it's going to be a hard task because I think time is not with me, and all 3 of them are very eloquent and oratorical. So it's not about the occasion that I got to control, it's about the timing that I need to control to them, because if I were to give the mic, I think we will be here till 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So, but I already given them due notice, so I hope they can adhere to it, because I would like to have more questions from you guys, rather than, because during the discussion, this is actually going to be very important, because talking about identity, and it's a perpetual identity, and guess what? And I think your University Putra is what, in the 30 something since 19. How many years is University Putra? Oh, pardon? Yes, almost 80 years old. From an agriculture, you shift into this sort of mode. So, without further ado, let me introduce all the 3 speakers. I have to read one by one because they have written it well. So I have, with due respect. So the first one is Datuk Seri Chong Keat. So the speaker was educated at the Penang Free School and at the University of Manchester, graduating with a first-class honours, and at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology on the Commonwealth Fund Harkness Fellowship. He was a finalist of the RIBA Rome scholarship, practice under Malaysian Architects Co-Partnership and Architects Team 3, Jurubina bertiga, after helping to establish the conference hall, after establish the School of Building and Architecture at the Singapore Polytechnic. His projects include the Singapore Conference Hall, recently designated as a National Heritage Monument, Jurong Town Hall, UOB Bank and DBS Bank, and the Bank of Ceylon in Colombo. And in Malaysia, urban design for Shah Alam and Georgetown Central Area, planning, Komta and the Seremban State Mosque, and the Ibrahim Hussein Museum in Langkawi. He has been president of Singapore Institute of Architects and chairman of the Board of Architectural Education of Commonwealth Association of Architects, CAA, and founder chairman of Arcasia in Singapore. He served on several public boards, including the Housing and Development Board, and also on the UNDP panel for state and city planning for Singapore. Recently, he has served as honorary advisory consultant to the Penang Hill Corporation on strategic development planning. He received the PAM Gold Medal in 1997 and has served as visiting professor to the University of Manchester and the Quarter-Centenary Visiting Fellow to Emmanuel College, Cambridge. He received an LID honoris causa from University of Manchester in 1997. He has served as chairman of the Forest Research and Development Board, FRRM, from 2001 to 2004, and is currently involved in bioheritage and botanical research, publishing journal Folia Malaysiana, and establishing a research conservation project, the Surana Botanic Gardens in Penang, and he recently also was elected as a fellow of the Academy of Sciences Malaysia. So without further ado, I would like to have Datuk Lim Chong Keat to give the first presentation. Oh, you want to say? Okay, fine. You can see. Okay. So Dato, yeah, the mic is there.
Okay, can you hear me? This is okay. Well, should we say good morning, good afternoon? This is actually one of the most difficult talks I ever gave at the age of 93. And secondly, since my eyesight is fading, I can't see all your faces, but I hope you're all here to listen to critical comments on architecture. I think the title tells you about what we are talking about: the end of architectural and cultural heritage, aspirations, objectives, and societal failures. Now, it may sound negative, but to be positive, we have to know what the negatives are. So if we keep on praising ourselves, we don't criticize ourselves, we will never really achieve a real culture that is lasting. I was, of course, happy to accept the invitation, but I was debating about the word perpetual identity, because perpetual suggests lasting forever. Nothing lasts forever. But memory could be perpetual. But you will see that the other difficulty is that, because although I know the principals of ATSA, who've done an incredible job in that exhibition, I'm going to be very critical of their work. So I hope they'll take it in good part and not shoot me before I leave here. So with that, the moderator wants us to just rush through. So can we have the next slide? Well, that's my CV. And I think the missing part that wasn't mentioned is the fact that I actually curated a program called C-Curb in Singapore, which has the biggest collection of ethnographic material about the traditional habitat of Southeast Asia. And the good news is that UPM is going to be one of the repositories for this collection, which will include some of my contributions to that. And in fact, it is because of Zaki that I'm here. And you know, it's funny how time goes by, but we first met in 1994 when I was visiting professor to Manchester, and he was one of the most active people in the architectural body called Mancunian and the Massa group. And I really like to see a reunion of the group because they should really exchange notes of what they learned from education in that part of the world. Next. The abstract, I think, will go by, but I think I'll just be prompted by the last few words here. World Architecture Day, I think should be called World Advertising Day. Too much advertising. Clough, why not Malaysian? So since I think we have people from PM here, that's my comment, because why don't we have a Malaysian architecture forum, not just KL? The logbook note that I wrote, I hope you'll read it at some point, because it refers to bigger issues of going outside Malaysia, linking with the region. The latest journal I looked at, very impressive, and but I have a comment of it, and I don't know whether the editors are here, but I think they should be looked at and receive some comments. It's very smart, but why show buildings without plans? And there's too much gimmicky titles in the book and too much advertising. I would like to see a journal that banishes the advertising to an appendix. You can still send it as an attachment, and so that the advertisers will still be served. But we should simplify the journal, and we should show buildings with plans, not just pretty pictures. So you can see that I believe that we should be critical about our work, and I hope I will need protection, because after what I say, you can see that I take a different view from what ATSA is heading for. They're flying, but they may need to come down to ground. Next. Actually, I gave several talks here before. I can see that if we think of the future, we have to examine what's good and what's bad that's happening now. This was at the Balai Lukis Negara KL. Next. And another one in 2012. So read the byline. In the context of a world in economic and environmental crisis and turmoil, irresponsible extravagance, stylistic crassness, and mindless derivativeness and jargonism. These catchwords, sustainability, livability, go green, ISO compliant, hide the failures in planning and design competence and maintenance, etc., etc. Next. There's another talk I gave here, actually, in 2012, somewhat along the same lines. Next. And another one, thinking about education, and in fact, I'm drawn to UPM because of Zaki and his colleagues, because I think that UPM can really become a real school of architecture, not just a degree granting program. It has to have a character and something very special in its philosophy to give to students. The students themselves must see beyond superficial ideas and create a community that is a real school of architecture. But look at the background. That is your real environment, not the pretty things you see in glossy magazines, but good if you were an air conditioning salesman. Next. The last talk, which was very enjoyable, which was actually a Zoom talk organized by this department, brings me back to an area I got very interested in, because whilst I was getting to grips with the modern movement in architecture, I was also aware that we need to know our ethnographic roots in traditional architecture. And this collection hopefully will come to UPM, and I believe an exhibition may be due next year. Next. Well, this was the program we did in Singapore, which has the largest collection covering the whole region, including Malaysia. And is not just keeping a repository, you have to work on it, and I hope UPM will sponsor more trips to go and see living buildings. For example, it'd be interesting to know how many Malaysians have been across to Sumatra to know the Batak, the Karo Batak and the Toba Batak buildings. If you don't travel, you keep in your classroom, you'll end up by just doing paperwork. Next. Well, this was actually meant for Azim. Should we build buildings assigned forever? Depends how good they are. But, well, the memory may be forever, but some buildings should not be built forever. And of course, even as an architect, I have to suffer the fact that many of my buildings have been destroyed. I don't mind them being destroyed. I prefer them being destroyed rather than being distorted. Unfortunately, that's happening. Next. But why are developers putting up this kind of ambience? Why are we trying to be orang putih? Why? Okay, clap, please. Now, who are the architects for this project? Is Gamuda here? They won't shoot me if Gamuda is here. Would you accept a project to design this kind of thing? It is luring you to favor something outside that you hanker for, and you forget what to find internally, locally. Next. Who designed this? Anybody? Maybe a good fee. This is happening, and it's publicized in your newspapers. Now, the problem is the Institute of Architects, PAM, is not in a position to say anything because some of their members may be involved. So it's actually up to a school of architecture and body of students to speak up for what should be, to aim for that eventual perpetual identity. Next. Well, I looked at these books, and I mentioned a bit of the AM, but actually the Architecture Malaysia issue that actually had about my gold medal award is worth looking at, because you can see the difference in the magazine, very simple with a lot of background. Less fuss in the graphics and so on. This latest book, huge book that arrived, is Teng Nyom here, because I would like to fight with him. It's a huge book telling you everything about your history, including Majapahit and so on, which I don't think is quite relevant. It's a huge book, very difficult to digest, and I hope every member of PM Council should read it word by word. Then they don't have to sleep for a few days. But I found a funny thing. He made a comment about Komtar in Penang, and instead of giving his own opinion or asking me, he cited a comment in Wikipedia. Now, Wikipedia is the most unreliable thing, especially in botany. Why does a historian cite Wikipedia? In a Wikipedia, they more or less implied that Komtar destroyed the heritage of Georgetown. So you can have inaccuracy. So the one-liner is that don't trust historians. Next. This is what we did for Shah Alam. The original concept, in those days, very simple presentation. We don't have wonderful graphics and so on. But you can see the bones of creating a new town. And historians should study what has happened since then. The location of the mosque, the center and so on. I don't know, Azim, did you work on this? No, okay, next. Penang, the context, we have to really be realistic about trying to create an urban center. And it was preceded by years of study, not just putting up a big building. And the amount of study, which we call central area planning, has still got to be looked at. And I believe that students of planning should see what we went through, because sad today, I don't believe the planners are doing as much research work as what was done for this project. Next. You can see that we studied the historic area, the pivotal position of Komtar and its phases, how it links to the conservation area, the civic areas and so on. Next. And the distances from the center, walking distances. Next. These are another way of analyzing the area. So we actually did a lot of urban planning before we proposed a building that is serving a particular purpose in the center. Next. Singapore, this was what it was. And a few months ago, I went back to Singapore, was horrified at the change. And we'll come to that. Next. Again, we did a lot of studies for the Singapore River before we put up one of the first buildings, a 30-story UOB building. Next. And that was what was so nice, the conference hall, the MSA building, which is being knocked down. It's okay, but better knock it down than distort it. The conference hall, although it's designated a national monument, like the Jurong, has been distorted, but it actually can be restored. But the urban change due to greed in the real estate is a problem. We were designing to set plot ratios, like in Comtar, the plot ratio was 5:1. But the next developer will come and ask for bigger advantages, and you'll see what happened to Shenton Way. Next. The DBS, I believe, is actually one of our signal projects. Although it's pretty tall, it's actually longer than this tall, about 800 feet. And I think it was truly iconic as a pioneer building in Singapore. But what has happened to it? Next. My good friend Louis Hellman predicted what was going to happen to buildings in the city, where everybody tries to do gimmicky buildings. This is actually some of the fancy buildings by Aki Graham. So Louis Hellman says, save the yellow bank. Well, let's look at what's happened since. Next. This is what it is now. The whole building has been recladded and completely distorted. The whole plot ratio in the area had gone up by twice or more, which is silly because there was plenty of space in the reclaimed part of Singapore that could have housed the new buildings. So what it speaks is that even the clients themselves don't value the architectural contribution. Do companies value architecture? Do civil servants value architecture? Do bureaucrats value architecture? Do politicians value architecture? Next. Well, let's see what happened. Gherkin by my good friend Norman Foster. Well, he has destroyed the tradition of London. But because he's such a big name, backed by industry, he gets away with this building. And unfortunately, it sets waves of people who feel affinity with this. What do you call it, a cigar or something more phallic? Next. Then everybody goes tall. Now, we may be accused in Comtar of doing tall buildings, but tall buildings have to be appropriate in the right places. But if you want to be taller and taller, just make sure you can really use the place properly. This is, I have never been to the Middle East. I think I would probably die if I go there and see the buildings. Next. Now, silly twisted buildings by Ram Koolhaas in China. Now, should we be so clever? Be so, you know, the word silly twisted is a joke in Britain. Why build like that? Now, it's a gimmick. And worse, it happens if you try to copy it. Next. And look at what happened in Expo in Shanghai. I must be protected if I mention names like Zaha Hadid, whom I regard as a criminal. Next. But look at Shanghai. Look at the skyline. Well, I'm glad I'm not living there. Next. Next. Well, it's okay if you're doing Disneyland for an exhibition. Next. And then you can dream and hope it doesn't sink. Next. Now, do you know this project? Lilian, speak up. We have to be frank in looking at history. This project was proposed for the Penang Turf Club by my good friend Ken Young. And who did he propose it? Proposed to be behind it. Next. Well, they are also silly twisted buildings. Serpentine. Next. And he publicized this great woman, Nasreen Saraji, the dream team. Read the blurb, the advertising. Next. The masterpiece, living, breathing, organic, dream team, defender of the environment. So how do you appraise this? You can say this is futurism, it's a gesture for the future. Whether it's buildable or not is another matter, but this has to be appraised in the context that we are at. Next. Look at that. Actually, I met her once, but I'm not sure she's a dream teamer. Next. Well, years ago, this is actually in 2010, I began to think about the future of environmental design and architecture. And the personal reminiscences and experiences in education and practice, perception of the real problems and challenges in development and governance that impedes professional work in the local and global context. And we have to be careful of the wastefully extravagant, iconic fashions that seduce the hyper-capitalist world. Next. Well, the latest in the desert. Next. This is the smartest stupid thing around. Carry on. It's from Avatar, actually. Who would like to live there except prisoners? Maybe you can move both Israel and Palestine there. Next. Look at that. And look, on YouTube, you can see all the gimmick, all the people who are working for this, trying to justify it, you know. Ask them to come and debate this scheme, including, of course, the Crown Prince. Next. A revolution in urban living, the line. Look at now, computer graphics is a very dangerous thing because it can give you the impression of reality, but it could also tell you to go behind the surface to see what the reality is. Next. Look at that. Would you like to live there and jump off parachute from one level to the other between the two glass walls? Next. Wonderful. Is it sailing? Is this a crime to your intelligence? Do they think that this is worth building and living in? Next. Before and after, I just think of all the sand being roasted by the reflective glass and living in that line. Next. But this has been precedented. The stupid things, the vanity of man. This is a famous painting that precedes the Tower of Babel by Bruegel. And I put it at that time thinking that, well, Dubai or Beijing could build it too. Next. And of course, it was such that you would have 9/11, a truly iconic target. Next. This is Peter Bruegel, the Tower of Babel in 1563, warning that you shouldn't build edifices which are overly ambitious and, well, certainly has no perpetual identity except as a failure. Next. So who are the blame game for architectural disasters? The client, planning authority, the banker, the architect, contractor, historian, or NGOs? This is what I want you to talk about. Be critical of the buildings being put up and think of the future, which I believe we must give up all the ideas of extravagance for a more equable world that can be shared. Any more? Next. Well, I think that's all. Have I kept between my time? Where's the moderator? Next. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Dato. You really kept your time. You really kept your time. So, Dato, you can sit at the audience there while I introduce the second speaker. So, the second speaker is none other than Dato Hajeedar Abdul Majid. He's born in Kuala Lumpur on 27 July 1945. So, Dato Architect Hajeedar Abdul Majid studied at Pasar Road School and Victoria Institution. Graduated from Portsmouth Polytechnic, United Kingdom in 1972. In architecture, majoring in urban studies and conservation. He started his architectural profession in Brighton, UK, before joining Urban Development Authority UDA in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, as architect and ending as deputy director. Awarded the Ali Mangku Negara AMN by the Yang di-Pertuan Agong in 1978. Awarded certificate of city planning from Japan. He set up his own firm, Hajeedar and Associates Sendirian, in Kuala Lumpur, 1978. An active member of the Institute of Malaysian Architects, PAM. He was president PAM 1985 to 1987, member of LAM, and member to initiate the Aga Khan Foundation for Islamic Architecture in 1980. Other involvement includes architect advisor to Kuala Lumpur City Hall, member advisory council for national culture, and the honorary council for the Republic of Maldives in Malaysia. In education, he was an adjunct professor to the School of Architecture, University Putra, Malaysia. For his conservation and restoration works, he was awarded the Penguin Prize by the Norwegian government in 1985. He was conferred Darjah Kebesaran Sharifuddin Idris Shah DSIS by Duli Yang Maha Mulia Sultan Selangor Darul Ihsan in 2009, and in 2013 he was bestowed the 7th recipient of the PAM Gold Medal Award 2012. Conferred CIDB Fellowship in 2015, and in 2016 conferred Darjah Setia Tuanku Muhriz Yang Amat Gemilang DSTM by the Duli Yang Maha Mulia Yang Di-Pertuan Besar Negeri Sembilan. So without further ado, I'd like to give you Dato Hajeedar Abdul Majid, and you have the same time as Dato Lim Keat. Thank you.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and good morning, afternoon. Good morning still, yeah. Thank you very much. I do not know whether UPM has risked yourself with me, in the sense that I have a reputation for overrunning my presentation, because as always I've got a lot more to say than what I can at a forum like this, because this is an opportunity that I take with humility to share with you in respect of the journey that I have undergone, which you are all going through, and that you will find the joys and disappointment in practice. So the topic today, as selected by the organizer, is perpetual identity in the context of the country and development of architecture. I would like to labor on the first 3 slides, because that's the message that I want to share, and then I will conclude with the last slide. But in between, I will try and elaborate what I mean by what I have defined. So I'll start off with the first slide, please. I think before we speak on anything, we need to define what the subject matter is. And I take this liberty on the understanding that it's never too late to learn. So irrespective of your age, we need to learn something. And today the lecture, as the saying goes, as the program says, is defining what perpetual architecture is. So I have taken liberty to define it here, occurring repeatedly, so frequent as to seem endless and uninterrupted, and that knowledge and skill for continuity of application by the architects. That is the mission today. With continuity of creative application through knowledge and skill, architects can subjectively reflect perpetual architecture in their works. The basis of such abilities lies within a deep sense of knowledge and awareness for the human and humane, ancestral and cultural realities. With deeper and more inclusive knowledge of other cultures and heritage, the greater sensitivity of an architect can be equipped to explore, propose, and apply his creative senses, flavors, and values to propagate his mental vision, feelings, and ideas into the reality in life. This is the end product that Dato Seri Lim Keat has referred to. And we are not absolved from criticism. You know, we must be able to criticize and be criticized from time to time, because that's our job, and that's the chosen career that we've made. Hence, the pursuit of excellence and creating tangible building forms are the key, are the byproducts of multi-layered considerations of values and decisions. So, simply put, with knowledge and perhaps opportunities, you might be able to get some perpetual results. Next. Okay, distinct creations of environmental products and spaces, such as buildings within their respective socio-economic, physical, urban contexts, shall provide the necessary differences in character, form, quality, and ultimately the identity of a community. Human curiosity, instinct, and natural responses to the five human senses of sight, smell, touch, taste, and hear shall form the basis of creativity and identity in architecture. Such awareness contributes towards the conscious and subconscious self-development into your sixth sense for an architect. This shall also provide greater and better opportunities to sustain the quest for a more balanced response and value towards nature and the built environment. The journey of an architect, journey in architecture, is an exposure and appreciation of life values in humanity and the blending of the arts and the sciences within the natural and built environment. Hence, architecture is identity and identity is architecture. The need to know and the need to understand and the need to continue to pursue perpetual architecture. Next. So, this is the third slide that I want to emphasize on. There are architects and there are architects. I'm just one, Datuk Lim Chong Keat is yet another, and Lilian is yet another. And all three of us will reflect our own personal interpretation and understanding of the subject matter and the products that results from our own intellectual understanding. So, and each architect shall develop and proceed at his or her own pace and capacity to pursue, in pursuit for excellence in an architectural career. The choice is personal, and also the levels of achievement shall be varied and limitless. I've said this often, architecture is common sense and the rest is nonsense. If it doesn't make sense, it's nonsense. Reject it. So, I have done, as described by Mus today, a journey. In fact, I'm fortunate in the sense that I've spent 50 years, half a century of my professional career in this country. And I think I'm quite privileged and blessed to have had the experience to share it with you, because 50 years is a long time, you know, between what I was doing as a young architect to what I'm doing as an old architect today. So there you are. The journey started with 7 years of learning process in architecture in the UK, followed by 50 years of professional practice, 5.5 years with UDA, and 45 years in the private sector, and had the privilege of designing a variety of projects and producing many concept master plans that has been abandoned or stolen or whatever you call it. Plus, continuing my interest in the professional development, heritage, and education. And historically, if you don't know, I started this department 25 years, 30 years ago, in 1996, when I was invited to set up this department. Anyway, today I shall share the passion that I've gone through and some of the experiences of projects with, I believe, some perpetual values. Because if you look at the building, there are stories behind the building. So maybe here's an occasion. I'll try and I have selected of the many buildings that I've done, some that will represent what I mean by way of my understanding of perpetuity and continuity. Okay, next please. Okay, I'll take you back to 1975 when there was a competition to do timber houses organized by PAM. In 1975, PAM was very active in trying to sustain the usage of timber because brick houses, the link houses, were getting to be too expensive. So we ran a competition, and among those who participated and won was my good self, Mio Shariman, the late Mio Shariman of MAA, and Lai Lukan. We were the winners at the PAM competition, and this is what I did. And we had a budget of as little as possible. So for 15,000 ringgit, I used tannalized wood, timber, that was produced by Mara to build this house on a modular basis. Our module then was 4 feet, 4 feet grids. You know, today is 1.2. We've gone metric, so it's 1.2. But with 4 foot module, most of the building materials were, especially plywood, was 8 by 4. So it fits in very well with this design, and we built this in 5 days. Can you imagine that? The whole house was built in 5 days at a budget of 15,000. So once upon a time, this is how we present our schemes, you know, hand-drawn, and not with all these computers today. But irrespective, the idea is to share your ideas in an abstract form into reality. Okay, that's the beginning in the 70s. So this was displayed and constructed in Taman Ta for a year before it was sold and dismantled and relocated elsewhere. This particular house was relocated in Kuantan. Next. Then this is my other passion, as I mentioned, or most have mentioned earlier. I am very concerned about heritage and the destruction of a lot of our heritage buildings. So way back in the 70s, again 76, 77, I wrote 2 papers on the need to introduce conservation of our heritage in this country, especially with the very rapid destruction of our older buildings being replaced by newer buildings. So one building that was available then was the Chow Keat department store, which was bought. This is Lok Chow Keat. You know Chow Keat Road, but you don't know who Lok Chow Keat is, so this is it. And even our PAM building was Lok Chow Keat's residence, you know, for those who don't know. But anyway, this building was available, and in 1982, 83, I was approached by the then president of the Industrial Court, who happened to have read my articles, and it was 5 years later that he challenged me to put my money where my mouth is. Don't just talk, just do it. And this is what I did. And having restored that building and converted it to 7 courts, it was very impressive. And this particular photograph was viewed by the then Prime Minister, Tun Mahathir, when he visited my office for another reason. And it sort of spurred on this need for conserving some of our older buildings. So, by virtue of this building being done, even City Hall managed to be convinced and adopted a section within the KL structure plan on conservation. Okay, next please. And that fateful visit to my office prompted the then Prime Minister to instruct JKR to appoint this defiant young architect to restore the other buildings within that group that was identified in my first papers. So the old JKR building, no, actually it was the old KTM administration building. It was here. Then it was taken by JKR. It was the first Bank Negara. Bank Negara was located in this building. And then later, it was a project site office for Daya Bumi. So immediately after they have finished the job, with Daya Bumi sitting on the right side, I was asked to turn this to the craft museum, Infocraft. So that's what it became. So adaptive reuse started to be introduced. Next. Then subsequently, 2 other buildings were added to my portfolio. One is the old Chartered Bank building, and the other is the former government printing press and telecoms to the KL Tourist Center. If you go to Dataran Merdeka, you will see this building still intact and used as a tourism center. Okay, next. Then, in 1989, we organized, Malaysia hosted COGM, the Commonwealth Conference of Leaders, and Malaysia has just got back the 2 buildings that were given away by Tengku Abdul Rahman in gratitude for giving us independence, but illegally. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Anyway, it was illegally given away by the government to the British, and the subsequent governments and the politicians campaigned to get those 2 buildings returned back to Malaysia because they belong to Malaysia, you know, or Malaysia, yes. And so in 1987, the buildings and the site was returned to the Malaysian government, while they were given replacement sites in Jalan Ampang and I can't remember, off for the British High Commission's residence. So this was converted to a boutique hotel called Kakosa Srinagara, in which the Queen and Prince Philip were the first guests at this particular building as a boutique hotel. No, it doesn't work here. Okay, next. Then, this is where one reflects on one's knowledge and try to do architecture that reflects the identity of the region that you practice in. Not KL. I practice in KL, but I mustn't do KL architecture in Kedah, for example. So this was the Dewan Undangan Negeri Kedah. And of course, the client, which is the state government, expects something that may replicate and relate to the culture and the values that the Kedah people have with regards to their rich heritage and culture. So the reference here has been to the Balai Besar, for example, here, and that has that pitch roof that has not only Kedah influence but Thai architectural influence. So this was incorporated within the buildings, and it became a nice reference to my way of expressing my perpetual architecture then, without knowing about this term perpetual architecture. We are talking about perpetual architecture today, but we were practicing perpetual architecture then. Okay, next. So likewise, there was an effort in the city that the pace of development was too great, that there must be some green enclaves. So Jalan Konle, where the Kraftangan is right now, plus other development, was identified. It was a 10-acre site that was meant to be green and with low-rise structures and building forms for the benefit of tourists. They don't have to go out all the way to Terengganu or Kelantan to enjoy tropical Malay architecture. So we thought this is a way of developing it, and even the hotels and the chalets with water features that reflects the kampung lifestyle and things like that was designed. But unfortunately, the development took a different turn, and there were people who argued that such a valuable piece of land in the city center should not be developed and low-rise, but into high-rise. So that's why across the street from this particular site in Jalan Konle is Badan Warisan, which is a single-story bungalow, and next to it is the Hoods monstrous 88, I think. So there's no sense of respect for scale and humanity. So, okay, go on. Then ultimately, next. Ultimately, we ended with just this. This is the Kraftangan complex today, in the original sense, as drawn, hand-drawn. I do not know whether Fahmi is here, architect. He used to work with me. I don't know whether, did you work on this? A little bit, there you are. So this is contribution for everybody, and I think he understood a bit of perpetual architecture then. Okay, go on. So, next. Then, way back in 1988, you know, Bank Negara used to have state cawangan Bank Negara, because all your check transaction must be cleared within the day. So instead of sending all the checks to KL for clearing, they had branches in Kedah, Penang, Perak, and Melaka. So fortunately, I was awarded this particular package, and the instruction was to create Melaka architectural form. Like it or not, so that's how it was. So it is completed as Bank Cawangan Melaka Bank Negara, and subsequently, I think about 2 or 3 years later, there was no need to do check clearances in the respective states, so it can be done online. So the project was redundant, so it's taken over by Bank Simpanan Nasional today. But what surprised me, that because it seems so eminent in the Melaka skyline, that subsequent projects or buildings that were built in Melaka started to emulate the Bank Negara. So you have the Melaka City Hall that looks like that, and then Pejabat Kerajaan Negeri Melaka like that. Of course, the complex Mahkamah also emulating the Melaka roof form, and of course the Malacca Sultanate Palace Museum to reinforce the fact that this is going to be Malacca's architecture, and everyone was happy. And as far as the architect is concerned, he has done his job and move on to yet another project, another challenge. Okay, next. Then, modernism. Ko Beng Tek, my associate, refers to this as the original twin. The copy twin is there reflected in the glass. You know? In that photograph up there. This was twin. It was not just built because he wanted twin projects, but it was a business strategy that one tower sits on one land title and the other sits on another title, so that in the event that the owners want to sell, they can sell one tower to cross-finance the other, which my client did in the case of Bank Pembangunan and Bank Industry. If you go down Jalan Sultan Ismail. Yeah? Okay, next. Then another classic reference about perpetuity. We were appointed for just one headquarters, Maybank Assurance. Then Maybank Finance wanted to be with us, and then Maybank Life wants to be with us. So finally we had to develop a three-tower of identity within a common podium. After all, they come from the same parent. So the influence or the inspiration came from the traditional coins, the hole in the center. You know, before we had wallets, we string our money. They used to string their money through the square hole. So that square hole is the courtyard in between all the three buildings, and I have graphically suggested the relationship of three identities within one site into this yin-yang and the square in the square geometry to create an architectural form. You know, anyone passing it will just see it as a building, but there are stories behind it, and this is more interesting than the actual building. Next. We'll try to rush. Okay, this is yet another attempt at trying to break the mold, meaning that instead of staying in hotels, you stay in service apartments. So in year 2000, we completed this project for PNB, and Datuk Lim Chong Keat's brother, Lim Chong Yu, was on the board of PNB, and he was one of my clients that I had to explain in terms of the development of this project, and became a trend to have service apartments as opposed to hotel rooms, because there was a trend then. You see, all this relates to knowledge and circumstances. In the late 1900s, there was a trend of Middle Eastern tourists coming to Malaysia, staying in hotels. But unfortunately, those who could afford to stay there, and they all can, their level of civil respect is less. So some of them started to cook on the floor in the hotels and do really damage. And most hotels don't want them. You know? So we thought, why don't we offer them the comfort of home by doing service apartments, so they can do whatever they like. And even then, okay, I'll try and do it as quickly. Next. Okay, there are other buildings. I think the last building, one Sophia was with me on that, and so was this. This was the second prize winner for the telecoms headquarters design. And so for second prize, we get a lower building to to design. But the good thing about it is it reflects the site. You know, the building reflects the site because it's at the corner of Jalan Semarak. Okay, next. Okay, in Putrajaya, my one and only big project in Putrajaya. This is a project that was assigned to me, but I took time to challenge them to say that there is no need for this building. And of course, they were not happy. We've given you a job, and instead of doing it, you question us for giving you the job and creating the job. So, quite rightfully, when it was completed, nobody wanted it. It was meant to be the place for office chanceries. But foreign missions don't want to be together. They want to be separated. They cannot exist together because of their secrecy, because of their confidentiality. So, for several years, it didn't, it wasn't occupied. But 23 years later, they still owe me some fees. And this was pointed out by public audit. You see how critical our audit. Their own auditors approve it, but the public audit says you owe Hajeedar 92,000 outstanding fees. So this is the moral and the lessons learned, you know. And this is why Zul is organizing a workshop next month, in January, on entitled Pitfalls of Practice. Practice isn't all pretty. There are some nasty things that goes on in practice. Next. Okay, resorts. Okay, I've just been told yesterday that this particular holiday villa in Langkawi, which was the first hotel, resort hotel built on the occasion of the first Lima. They had not enough rooms. So for 10 months, we worked to finish 260 rooms on the coast at Pantai Tengah. So I've just been told yesterday that this particular project has been sold to another new owner and things like that. So, okay, next, resort. And this is quite a recent resort, about 3 or 4 years ago. Built, it looks like timber, but it's not timber, it's concrete planks. This is working with the industry. So, because we've proven it in the Langkawi, in the Cherating Villa, that the cement timber panels have survived for all that years, as opposed to trying to be authentic, using real timber, which will last for about a year, especially during the tropical monsoon. Okay, next. Okay, tradition, masjid. That's another area that I'm fortunate to be involved in. And of course, I make quick reference to traditional masjid form in this country and the influence with the Nusantara. The oldest masjid, 1400, Kampung Laut. Also, ATSA has been involved in the transformation and documentation back to Nilampuri and the others. Okay, next. Then, this was the first 3 masjids that I did way back in the 1980s when Kejora was developed. It's a development area preceding or about the same time as Risda in Johor. So they had the houses, they had the shops, then they realized they don't have mosque. So can we get an architect to do the mosque? So I designed this very simple mosque, and it worked for several years, for decades, until they've pulled it down and replaced it with a permanent brick mosque. Next. Okay, my first concrete mosque is the Masjid Sayyidina Abu Bakar Siddiq, which is already 41 years old. So here is an attempt to conceptualize a project within an existing residential area where there is no provision whatsoever in the master planning for places of worship. So it has, so through, this is where architects must have other skills apart from designing, is to negotiate and talk. You know, you must be able to talk. My wife tells me I talk too much. But the ability to talk can influence and make a decision to allow the developer to sacrifice very expensive piece of land for the purpose of building a mosque to serve the community, the Muslim community. And in so doing, on a win-win basis, the potential development of that particular site has been transferred to the adjoining site, so they have not lost anything, but they've gained the respect of the residents that live in that area who have bought the homes from the same developer. So there you are. What goes around comes around. So this is the concept I don't want to explain. Next. Now that's the image of the mosque. And thank you for Azim and partner to have included Masjid Bangsa in that sketch somewhere. Okay, that's the photograph of the mosque when completed in 1982. Next. Then this is the benefit. If you do a good job, you know, people will recognize it and they want you. So for that particular mosque, arising from that particular mosque, I was invited personally by the President of the Republic of Maldives to design their national mosque in the middle of the Indian Ocean in the Republic of Maldives. So this was the building, and it caught a lot of attention. Of course, there's the President at the top with me then, and then attention of the Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister, who did not believe that a Malaysian architect was doing something else elsewhere in the middle of the ocean. And it not only attracted our government, but also other leaders, including Yasser Arafat there, and Zia-ul Haq and others. So they have contributed, and including the Sultan of Brunei contributed cash towards the development of this. So architecture and architects are not just, you know, commercial, but we are human. So go on, next. So that's the spin-off. And of course, for those who are familiar with UIA, I was involved in the master planning together with others and the campus. And of course, the mosque became the center of the campus, the academic, so that there is a covered network, a network of covered way within the campus, that no students, no lecturers can use the excuse that the weather is bad and I cannot get to class, you know. So that's another spin-off of the mosque. Next. Then a musalla. This, I had to quote this and make reference to this because it is my first project after Putrajaya was created for about 15 years. Hajeedar finally landed a project in Putrajaya. It was a mosque. That was a surau for 3 million, while others were getting 100 million. And so, alhamdulillah. So, but I find that this is the most satisfying building in that I have designed, in the sense that this musalla has no doors, no windows, and it's cross-ventilated, and it brought back, reinstated the condition of the soil, original soil, and brought back the birds and the chinkire, as well as the worms in the topsoil. Next. Then another spin-off, another mosque in PJ, a replacement, because it was costing the authorities $1 million a year to retain the original mosque. So for another 10 million, you can get a brand new mosque. Okay, next. Then this is another adaptive reuse. The doors in the original mosque in Bangsa was dismantled because the new designers did not like the timber doors, and they wanted it to be replaced with aluminum frame glass doors. So they threw away all these doors. So I picked them up and used them to build a surau, musala, in the campus of University Malaya. So if you go to the campus, both the musalas or the suraus were designed by me. Next. Okay, resort, coming back to Malaysian architecture. These are just design proposals. Next, very quickly. Then did the master plan for Pangkor Laut. Having done the master plan, of course, I was no more the architect. We only got involved in the first stage, and subsequently others take over. That is the price you pay for being an architect. Okay, next. Then master plan for Mersing Laguna in Mersing. Because at low tide, the beach is about 3 kilometers out into the sea. And at low tide, no boats can leave Mersing. So we strategize that we dig the ground because it's very shallow and to recover. So it was intended to be a very economical redevelopment proposal. It got through the approval, it got through the DEIA, Detailed Environmental Impact Assessment, and the tragedy of it is that the client died. So the architect is left hanging. Anyway, ideas we will share and contribute. Okay, next.
Dato.
Okay, I will try and complete. 1 more minute.
Second and third.
Okay. So I'm living up to my reputation. My interest in conservation. We did try to reinstate the KTM hotel, railway hotel in KL, and in fact, we've done the proposal, submitted, shortlisted. Then there was a change in government. So the project is abandoned just like that. Next. See, this is the amount. Those who are interested in heritage, you'll see a lot of information here. Next. Okay, this is what I do today. Before I finally move on to the next world, I'll try and document some of the drawings we have done. At the top left-hand corner, those were the drawings I personally did in 1979. I drew the Masjid Jami' then, and it was built in 1909. So 70 years later, an architect redrew this building, and I've kept it, and it's in the museum at the mosque. And I have gone to do all this using SketchUp as possible architectural posters. Next. Okay, recently completed a 100-year house, restored along the lines of what Azim has done with Bagas Zakaria, but this is a private residence. So we brought modernity, 3-phase water supply, and proper bathrooms instead of a well, you know. So there you are. Next. And currently I'm doing an extension to an existing mosque in Seri Menanti, where we have created this masjid dalam taman and taman dalam masjid, because the masjid is absolutely full and spilling out during Hari Raya or on Fridays, but otherwise it's lonely. So rather than keep a lonely space, we create a park within the masjid during the off-peak period. Next. Okay, history of architecture since independence, from the old airport to the new airport. You will see the hyperbolic, parabolic roof structure there. Then you get brutalism at the University Malaya and the hospitals. And then Kenyang's bioclimatic architecture as contribution since independence. Go on, next. And then, of course, this attempt at identity in the past. These are physical evidence. You can see for yourself, and perhaps you want to hear and find out how the transformation from the Tongkolok to the library, National Library, from the Istana to the banking hall of Bank Bumiputera, from Rebung to the telecom headquarters, the winner of that little competition, and Menara Maybank from the Chris. Next. And then, last but not least, today. Today, you know, architects are aspiring to be Malaysian identity, architecture identity evolution, from traditional forms to skyscrapers, and from human scale to superhuman scale. Rightly or wrongly, I'll pose it to you. And then a contrast of iconic identities of the PNB 118, which when completed officially shall be the second tallest building in the world. Okay, next. Okay, last. Mus, you should be happy. And the context of architecture and everything else, the proof of the pudding is when you eat it. Dah masak, you must makan. If it is nice, then you appreciate it. If it's not nice, you won't talk about it or think about it. And the results are appreciated and sustainable over time. People will repeat it. And this is where you get perpetual architecture. In perpetual architecture, the need to know, the need to understand, and the need to apply and continue the search for knowledge is fundamental in architectural identity. Once understood, perpetual knowledge becomes the natural, intellectual, artistic attributes of consciousness and subconsciousness within a person. That's you. With wider knowledge and design opportunities, an architect can produce meaningful results, which can be of the highest intellectual and creative satisfaction and achievement in perpetual architecture. So, go for it. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And thank you, Mus, for being tolerant.
Thank you very much, Dato Hajeedar. I think I wanted to stop, but I think I had to listen to the last one. So, thank you. So, the next speaker is Architect Lilian Tay. Architect Lilian Tay trained as a civil engineer and architect at Princeton University in USA, where she obtained her Bachelor of Science Engineering and Master of Architecture in 1990. She worked at Co-Pedersen Fox Associates in New York City prior to returning home to Kuala Lumpur. Lilian has been principal of Veritas Architects since 1995. Lilian's interest in architecture extends beyond that of professional practice. She is committed to the development of greater appreciation of design within the profession, and she is amongst the Malaysian public through her involvement in professional development activities, education, exhibitions and publications. A former editor of Architecture Malaysia, officially Journal of PAM, she has written on works of architecture in Malaysia and had initiated a controversial comment called Column Buka Mata, which had seen a landmark defamation suit which was successfully defended to send legal case history for the right of critical comment in Malaysia. During her tenure as PAM Vice President 2000 and 2001, she produced a major retrospective of Malaysian architecture at the Gallery Petronas entitled 80 Years of Architecture in Malaysia. She also curated a photography exhibition at the National Art Gallery entitled Confluence, a portrait of Kuala Lumpur which documented the evolving and disappearing physical and social landscape of the city. She is presently a council member of PAM and chairs the Media and Publication Committee, a council member for Badan Warisan Malaysia since 2002. Lilian advocates her conservation of urban architecture heritage, particularly in Kuala Lumpur. Lilian has spoken on topics related to architecture and urbanism at design seminars and education forums, and regularly involved as external examiner and critic at our local School of Architecture. And one more thing that I would like to add is she is the currently PAM Gold Medalist 2023. The First Lady won it. Thank you. Lilian, the floor is yours. Would you like to be here or to be there?
feel very honored to be in the same forum as Datuk Hajeedar and Datuk Lim Chong Keat. We are many years apart. I checked, we were 30 over years apart in age. I'll keep to my 20 to 25 minutes time. Okay, this topic, when it was given to me by the organizers, I think Azim, I thought what was really perpetual is not perpetual identity, but our architects' perpetual search for identity. And it's a continuing journey really for all of us, because perhaps identity sort of evolves over time, and identity is premised over many factors. To trace the nation's timeline, I always see that our work is a reflection of the timeline of our own nation, at least in my memory. From the start of Merdeka, of course I wasn't quite born yet then, but it's an important milestone when the nation was created. We had national icons built for that time, as we all know, Merdeka Stadium, and the Merdeka Park I wanted to mention, which is the site today of M118, the park no longer exists. And then another major milestone in the nation's history, of course, is the May 13 incident that created, that resulted in the new economic policy with its emphasis on national identity and nation building. I think these were very important milestones for architects, because we're always looking to do our work in the context of the nation. And Dr. Mahathir's era, I think, was also particularly important for architects. I mean, he launched the Vision 2020, which spurred a lot of the building that many of us have had the opportunity to work on, the building of Putra Jaya, for instance. That's an important milestone. And I forgot to mention some of the architectural icons from pre-Putra Jaya, pre-PM, Komta Tower, which was mentioned. Actually, I wanted to recognize that at the time when Komta Tower was built, I believe it was the tallest building in Asia. So, we didn't have to wait until the Petronas Towers to have, and we have right in the room, of course, Datuk Lim Chong Keat, who not just did the tower, but proposed a whole master plan. And that perhaps is the importance, actually, not of the iconic single building, object building, but what a big project can bring to the city. And that was probably the first comprehensive effort. The next was actually KLCC, which happened in Tun Mahathir's era. And of course, Tun Mahathir's took on the Commonwealth Games to ensure everybody delivered on time, because everything had to be delivered by 1998, KL Central Station, the airport, the stadiums. So these were quite important milestones. And then, of course, the creation of Putrajaya, the new capital, which allowed many architects, including ourselves, to have a chance to explore what identity means in a place which is a tabula rasa, sort of a clean slate, open, a clean slate to start all over again, perhaps. And of course today, even as recently as this year, we have, or last year, we have Malaysia Madani, which shifts a bit the emphasis from nation building to more sustainable development, more equitable distribution of wealth. I think all these, and that would be, I think, what would be underlying principles for us continuing into the future. So we feel that, well, I say we because unlike Dr. Hajeedar, where he is the sole figure, our practice is really a partnership, David, Hashim, myself, mainly, and then we have now our second and third generation designers working with us. We really work as a big team. So many of the projects are always done as a team. And these are just some of the projects, particularly, but that I believe are relevant to today. Okay, so our journey, I see also as running parallel to the nation's own timeline. We started in the 80s with buildings that were more modernist. And of course, being an engineer, I also had a particular interest in the structure of buildings, expressing the structure of buildings. And we grew a lot during the 90s, during the time when Putrajaya was built, really gave opportunities for ourselves and many architects to develop our work, as well as think about what the architecture actually creates ultimately, which is the place, the new city of Putrajaya, and what it aspired to, a garden city. And later on, that actually was a very important era, the growth era, intensive growth era, where we as a company also had opportunities to work on national projects. Not KLIA, unfortunately, but all the buildings around KLIA, like I like to say, every building, like the building that makes the food, the building that the animals are kept, the cargo, everything, except the glamorous, most important thing, the terminal, which was done by Kurokawa. So I felt from that time it was quite obvious that Malaysian architects are practicing globally. You know, we are not competing among ourselves, but we're competing with all the top architects in the world. So it's really tough to be an architect in Malaysia. Let me tell you that. And that continues till today. I'll show you more slides on that, because that's a topic that I talk about quite a bit and try very hard to find opportunities for our own talent to be recognized. So, and today on hopefully Malaysia Madani and a greater sense of place, of community would be the aspirations. Okay, just a quick, I'll have to make this very fast, I know, 20 minutes. Putrajaya Central, which was our first building in Putrajaya. It's not even a permanent building, a temporary building. And what we were interested in was what an architecture without walls looked like, because that's all we had to do, a bus stop, a big bus stop. And the natural things that architects would look at would be the climate, getting protecting the space from the climate, the inclement weather that we have with rain and hot sun. So that was one of the driving principles of our work until today, working with the climate, creating space which don't need to be reliant on air conditioning. And we already did that way before all this labeling of sustainable buildings came along. Of course, that's, it lends metrics to those buildings. In the early days, I think all of us, you saw the projects before, aspired to do the same, for the building to work with the local climate. And of course, we also wanted to celebrate the heritage, our local Malaysian heritage. And there were projects that we aspired to do that. This project, we didn't win the project, but I like to show it because it's one of those early efforts which set the tone of what we continued to do for many years, even till today. A building that tries to celebrate local materials. We try to use timber while respecting all the regulations and urban design guidelines of Putrajaya, the street wall, things like that. But instead of the sort of neoclassical or classical type of street wall that you would find in Paris, to make something that would speak of our nation and of our cultural heritage. This is a sort of a pixelated imprint of from a batik motif onto the facade, and it's actually in front of a curved timber wall of local timber. Unfortunately, we never got to build it, and in fact, until today, we still haven't been able to do it. Okay, we got to do one ministry building, and this one, of course, we did as a group of architects. There were 4 architects in this project. When we did the competition, we thought that the scale of Putrajaya was so big that each building was lost in between all the big avenues and the big boulevards. So our proposal was we were asked to do the design of one building, but what we did was we proposed a cluster of buildings so that it forms a strong gateway and would mark one of the key nodes along the 4.6 kilometer long boulevard of Putrajaya. And the boulevard is also 100 meters wide, so the scale is really large. And this was an attempt to address the scale of Putrajaya and how to have the buildings read in terms of the experience of the urban place. And we worked with 3 other architects, of which I think 2 are here, Zulkarnain Lee and Almas. Okay, so that's what we did. Sometimes we do more than what the brief would ask for. The brief asks us to do 1 building. We propose 4 buildings, and then we work together with 3 other architects to create that building. And again, the same search for creating space that will befit our local climate. We created a street, because Putrajaya was supposed to be all about creating a new city that was walkable, because it was patterned after the city fabric of the European cities that we love, with its street wall, Paris and Rome and Munich. But actually the scale was not quite the same scale as these old cities that evolved from a medieval fabric. So what we tried to do is to mitigate that by creating secondary walkways within the building block, because the building block was so large. And these are sheltered walkways with sunken gardens. Okay, so that was that. And we, even back then, this was 2001, we're already doing all these calculations to calculate the BEI. We didn't have any labels then. We didn't have the green mark. We didn't have the greenery or the GBI. So they were just calculations. And I hope that, well, today it would be a green-rated building, but at that time it was just left to the architect. And that's the great thing about being an architect. You are at the start of the creation of a building, and you get to do what you believe is important, irrespective of whether you're going to get a green mark rating or a green GBI rating. And this effort of ours to try and use local materials continues on many of our projects. On this one as well, we use balau timber, local Malaysian balau, not Indonesian balau, on the facade, on the podium to create screens against the western sun. And they're not decorative, they are supposed to be functional. And they are, we do go back when we finish the building and check, do they really work? And I always get my guys to please do the 4 o'clock shot to see whether it actually does shade the building and serve its purpose. Okay, DGHQ was another early building. I just show this because the same principle applied not on a government building, but on a public listed corporation, and in fact not even a Malaysian building, but it belongs to a Norwegian company. And the same principles apply whether we're working for a Norwegian or a Malaysian company, responding to the climate and creating space that are befitting of the climate that we live in. We created an indoor atrium, indoor street that is also an atrium, and it really became the heart of the whole community that works at DG. And I would like to mention that when the client gave us the brief, that space was never in the brief. You know, you will get a brief with a list of rooms similar to when you work for the government, you know, super scale G, you get what size room, how many square foot of windows. So we also got that same brief. And so I think the architect's role is always to go beyond what is the given brief and to find what could be perpetual, perhaps, in terms of its significance to the community that lives in, that would work or live in the building. So we created this indoor street. Again, you see as often as we can, we'll try to introduce timber into the building. The same balau timber is used in the atrium, and that we'll go through very quickly. Okay, and then another building, this time taller, was One Central, where we tried to do the same. It's a typical generic corporate office building with no identity. You don't know who's going to be living in it, who'll be working in it. So all we work with is how to make the building have something to which is meaningful. And for us, it was trying to make it Malaysian, because we don't want to inherit the mold of office buildings that was very prevalent then from the West, which is all glass boxes. So we tried to do a screen that was also built with timber. And I remember when we did this, everyone was not very convinced. They said, "Oh, the timber's going to, you know, warp and fall down and whatnot." So we really had to detail it very well, such that it would be lasting in the climate that we have, which is quite. We've got the rain and the sun, which are quite damaging for timber. But this, till today, we feel very proud of this building, which is one of the first times that we were able to put timber on a high-rise building as a screen. Again, not decorative. The 4 p.m. shot, it really does create some shading in the worst part of the day, in the afternoon. So that thread of trying to find a sense of a local place continues in projects. Menara Binjai, similarly, we tried to bring the garden up, and we also kept the trees that were existing on the site, kept them for 3 or 4 years until they were ready to be put into the building. There wasn't enough to make structural elements, of course, but we tried to celebrate again the use of local timber, as well as to remember the trees that were actually on the site, which was an old bungalow from the 30s in Jalan Ampang. So we tried to we actually recycled part of the timber. Wasn't enough, we had to add some, but it was a gesture of remembering the site and its original trees. Okay. The same thing, we tried to bring the garden up, make the garden accessible. We saw many architects were doing that, making these sky gardens, but we felt that one thing that was not addressed at that time was how to make these sky gardens more usable. And because normally in the afternoon it rains a lot, so most of them are not well weather protected. So we started to evolve these rain protected gardens with permeable glass walls. That was in Menara Binjai, Penang, sort of my second most beloved place in Malaysia, after KL, of course. We had a chance to do a small building in Penang, where again, we had a chance to address the very rich historical heritage of Penang. It was also my first project in Penang. We looked at the old maps it's just a renovation of one shop house to create a small hotel and performing arts studios, rehearsal space. So we looked into the old maps to understand what was there before, because the building, when we got it, was already all covered up. The courtyard was covered. So what we sought to do was to uncover the courtyard that was built up, open it up again. So it's very simple, and the way we wanted also to commemorate part of the history of Penang, the cultural history, the community history, one of which would be the clan jetties along the east coast of Penang, where these timber homes were built along the jetties. So similarly in the Sinke Hotel, we float the corridors. They don't touch the party walls. And they are supposed to remind you of the clan jetties. That's our client, that's what it looked like and how it is when it's finished. An intervention that again uses steel. Again, we don't necessarily want to make buildings that a duplication of the past, but reflect the present. But we also want to fix things that were wrong, not wrong, but were defective, like the tenement, the shophouse space is very dark actually, especially when people tend to cover the courtyard. And we wanted to bring light back into the shophouse space so that it's not dark. And that's all we aspired to do, to uplift the space in a shophouse, which traditionally is really dark and Many families live in it. There's no sense of space and light at all. Okay, we had a chance to do the first round of MRT stations, which were in the city center of KL. That was an interesting opportunity again for us to explore national identity, because we were very proud that we're building the mass rapid transport stations. And this one, which is at Pasar Seni, we also wanted to commemorate the place right at the confluence of the river. We sort of looked at the river and how its course were changed over time, straighten for to embank it for flood control purposes. But basically that Y shape is very strong, and we wanted to emulate it in the station design. So you will see this in the station. If you look for it, there is a panel that shows the evolution of the shape of the confluence over the last 100 years. Merdeka Station, also another station. Of course, we had to commemorate here the birth of the nation, which we tried to do. I think in the next couple of phases of MRT, we weren't allowed much opportunity to create a sense of place. We had a standard design that had to be used on all stations, and I think it's a real loss of opportunity, because every public project, like the transport station, should really express a greater sense of place. I mean, there will be some gestures, but I do believe there's room for a lot more sense of place, so that you don't feel like you're in this system that takes you from one end to the other, and you don't even know you're reliant on just the map to show that you're going from this station to that station. So trying to create a sense of place, a sense of identity, so that's part of the perpetual search for identity that we're talking about. More recently, we had a chance to do the Saloma Bridge. Actually, this was after we were doing the bigger thing, which was a master plan for Kampung Baru, which many of us have done. I think Dato Hajeedar has also done a couple. And as always, it is very hard to execute the master plan. And at the end of that exercise, the client turned around and said, we can't execute the master plan, what can we do? And we said, build a bridge. And he said, oh, that's a good idea, we'll build a bridge. So that was how Saloma came about, in that meeting room where the client just said, I only have this much money, and what can I build? And we said, the bridge. So it was always in our master plan, and we had done two in both master plans. The first one, we had more of a garden bridge. And so we developed this was the original one, where it was more open, but for reasons the client said, oh, no, it must be covered so that it's more usable. And though we objected earlier, I think his decision was good, because it forces to look at the bridge more as a form, rather than just a connecting bridge, a structure. Okay, so that's, I hope some of you have been there. It's, at night it's very crowded, and it's not so much, we were really not looking to create any iconic structure, but we were very proud that it was included in the recent stamps. There were 5 buildings on the stamp, and we were very proud that this is the only building of the 5 that's designed by a Malaysian architect. But it was also the smallest, because the rest were all these tall buildings in that stamp. I don't know if you've seen that stamp. Came out a year and a half ago. Okay, I think I'll skip that part. But I tend to show this because I know many people have a chance to do the master plan of Kampung Baru. But for us, the most important thing is not whether how high-rise it would be, but the opportunity to create another great public park for KL, the way KLCC had created when they built the Petronas Towers. So I hope whoever who actually ends up doing the Kampung Baru master plan, when they are able to finally execute it, would remember that it's very important to create that central public space that everyone can use, and not worry about what happens around it, because I feel that's a valuable lesson. And one thing that we did right in KL was the great park at KLCC that was built in the shadow of all the tall buildings. This Salama Bridge, it's the real purpose really is not to be an icon, but to serve a very practical function of connecting a very progressive and wealthy neighborhood to undeveloped heritage village. And it used to be you would need 40 minutes to walk from Kampung Baru to KLCC, and with the bridge, with the pedestrian bridge, it's now down to 15 minutes. So you can work in KLCC, you can walk to Kampung Baru and have your breakfast or lunch at Wanjo or at Nasi Lemak Antara Bangsa. So that's what makes us happy when we did that. It's not the iconic bridge, but to have connected the two neighborhoods. Okay, we'll skip that. Those are the details. And I do hope also that this will be retained. There are fewer and fewer of these old Malay houses. The design actually reflects where the communities came from. Some are like Perak, some Negeri Sembilan. There's even one that's of Terengganu. So they're all there, and they're all over they're scattered all over, and there are not that many remaining. I think UNICEF Malaya has done quite a good inventory of the remaining ones. That was around 10 years ago. And I hope one day that they can be salvaged and not be sort of run over by more tall buildings. And our proposal was to reconstruct them, move them from all their scattered location to the park, so that the park celebrates both the heritage, Malay, of the various versions of the Malay house, right inside a landscape public park. Okay. I'll skip through that. But really, the whole point of the Kampung Baru Master Plan, again, is not at all about the design. It is about the principle. And for us, it was, we saw that when you look at all the mega developments in KL, a lot of them were shopping malls and very luxury residences and office buildings, office towers. KLCC is all office towers, practically. And what was really needed, we felt, was a master plan that was focused on housing and bringing people back to live in the city. So that was the basic principle of our version of the Kampung Baru plan, which is to bring people back to live in the city. Angsana Resort, I just flash it very quickly just to show we haven't stopped doing it. 20 years. There's 20 years between the Putrajaya station and this, where we also sought to use recycled timber. And actually there's a lot of it in Penang, because many people have dismantled all the timber in their heritage shop houses, and you can still find some quantities of it at various warehouses, and that's what we did. There's never enough to do the whole building because it's also quite expensive, but at least we put it in the lobby to celebrate your arrival at the resort. Okay, and this is a project that's just finishing in Brickfields, where we had the onerous task of tearing down 100 buildings, 100 homes, which is 100 quarters. I'm sure Dato Hajeedar will tell me off for taking on this project, but it was already a done deal by the time we come by the time we were appointed. It was already a done deal. They already were relocated elsewhere, and what we saw were just 100 empty houses. We actually salvaged many elements from the old houses, various ones, and kept them in a trailer somewhere in Rawang. And I thought we kept a whole trailer of it, but by the time we were ready to use them in the pavilion that we proposed a commemorative pavilion that will have an exhibition of the history of the 100 quarters. A lot of the timber was stolen, and we only had a few pieces left, but we have salvaged, and they are actually installed in the glass pavilion that's in front of the building. Again, this was something that the client never put in the brief, and something that the client really wanted out of the brief, because he really didn't need to spend extra money on this. and it's quite hard, and I think that's the role of the architect is not to follow the client's instruction all the time, but to make a case for something that you feel is more perpetual in significance, and for us it was also remembering the history of the place, of the 100 quarters. I'll end with this project, not because it's a big project, but because of what it means to us and to me. You know, our office was 20 years facing the Petronas Towers in Jalan Ampang. So over those 20 years, we saw many buildings come up around the park. I myself, when I came back to KL in 1991, came back with boards for the Petronas Towers, which were not necessarily a pair of twin towers, but actually there were two schemes that were twin towers, which was the scheme that my company did, and Caesar Palace scheme. The rest were actually single towers. And anyway, I came back with a model and all that, but we never got to present because apparently Tun M had a chance to see all the schemes in the early morning, you know, probably after his horse riding thing, and he made his decision, without any presentations from anyone. I think he made a great decision, actually, even though he didn't choose our scheme. So that was the birth of the Petronas Towers, as I know it, from the sidelines. And then we continued to see over 20 years, all the buildings come up, the Maxis Tower, every tower around there was always built by somebody else. Here we have like 10, 20 PAM gold medalists, and none of us, I think, were ever offered the opportunity to build on that sacred circle. Datuk Hajeedar managed to build his MNI, oops, sorry, let's read the wrong one. Datuk Hajeedar's MNI twins were probably the closest. I think that's that one there, on the fringe of it. But it's almost completed, the ring around the Great Central Park. And so this building was significant to us because in 2014, there was a competition, a small competition, couple of architects called. Actually, we were the only Malaysian architect called, probably as a token. The others were Singaporean, and we had to do the presentation to the Singaporean client. And finally, after 20 years, we got a chance to build in the KLCC circle from a Singaporean client, the irony of it. And that's the tower that's coming up. And I only show it just to share with you why this is important for us, because we had a chance to build in this sacred circle. And our interest was not necessarily to build taller. We can't possibly build taller than all of the buildings around there. But we were more interested in creating more porosity through the buildings, as we did in DG, as we did in the Putrajaya Ministry, to allow people to walk through the building and to be able to get to the mosque on Friday, to be able to get to the park every day in a more easy manner, sheltered from the rain and all that. So I mean, this is all the details of what's all on there. And continuing that, we also continue to use elements inspired by the various batik that we have, and there are many types. And of course, batik is not just Malaysian, but also in Indonesian. We continue to try to refer and celebrate these rich cultural heritage elements. I think I'm about time now. So every project, irregardless of the building type or size, for us is an opportunity for continuous innovation, responding to the climate, to cultural identity, to the local environment, the place, I guess you call it today. And of course, now a more conscious and more measured approach to gauge your response in terms of your carbon footprint on the planet. So it's all more rigorous today, I guess, than when we started. It makes it much harder for you guys to be architect. You have to measure all these things as well. But I guess one must never forget the underlying principles are the one that's most important and can carry you through 30 years. And that's, I feel, what's most important. It's not the search for perpetual identity, but they are perpetual principles that can carry you through many, many years and many, many buildings.
Thank you very much, Lilian, for that wonderful show of the works related to culture. Lilian, could you sit on the dais now? Dato Hajeedar I would like to call, and also Dato Lim Chong Keat to be on the dais as well. So we go for the quick Q&A before I start to have catastrophe of people leaving the room. So because it's me now between lunch and you, okay? So you have to bear with me, give me, because you won't get 3 gold medalists here in your university for the next how many years, I'm not sure. So I think it's actually very historical. So you want to give the gifts first? Okay. I think. Hello. Can you hear me? Okay. We go for quick Q&A, and before the Q&A, I would like to do some summary so that you won't get lost with the translation. So we started off with Dato Lim Chong Keat talking about, you know, being sensible. So talking about the reality versus the surrealism, and also irony and also identity. So it's very, very difficult to actually create identity out of nothing, and I think in those years a lot of it are distorted. Then Dato Hajeedar pointed out about common sense architecture, and I think being common sense means you got to be responsible, and being responsible means you need to take the life value of humanity into consideration when you create identity. I think that's very, very crucial. And lastly was from Lilian, from the younger generation, trying to alert us that I think the survival of Malaysian architecture is the Malaysian architects continuously searching for the identity, and that will be the dynamism of you all as architects here in Malaysia, which is most important. Okay. I got one question, and I think this transcends to all 3 of you because you all are coming from 3 different eras. So the question would be to each one of you, or whoever can start first, is how do you all address the occasion requested by the clients to direct your architecture to interpret the Malaysian identity architecture at the time that we were supposed to design the particular building that was asked of? So I think I would start with Dato Lim Chong Keat to give you the honor.
Ladies first.
I got 2 choices, but I would choose for the senior first.
Let me try. It's an old story when you're trying to force a national identity. The real problem is whether it is a good architecture, good design or not. So what is good design? In the earliest days, when we made buildings, we derive on our background, but the function of the place or the particular project gives you certain clues. And I think if you take the case of the Seremban Mosque, it was a competition with a particular thing. But did we achieve an identity? In that case, it actually happened. But you don't set out to say, I want to make my building Malaysian. You want to make a good building. So I think that's what architectural schools must teach. What is good design? As against gimmicky design. And just putting a few motifs. Now, I think that we have to be very frank here. When I see what Hajeedar did with the roof forms in Malacca, I would debate it. For example, if you look at the derivation of the Seremban Minangkabau roof adapted on modern buildings, you have to make the decision, are they successful or not? That is what is important. So I think what we should be looking at is to do good architecture relevant to our environment and our location.
Dato Hajeedar?
Yeah, I agree with what Dato Lim Chong Keat has just said. It's just that sometimes the architect is at the mercy of the client, and this is where I have been through it, you know, in the sense that they have evaluated several architects, then finally they narrow down to you, and you are appointed as the architect, and they want us to just listen to them. So very often I will interject by saying that, you know, if you can design it, you do it by all means. You know, you don't need an architect. So this is where, as an architect, you take a stand. You are to interpret the requirements not in the context of just the client's brief and needs, but also the effect of the building that you are designing to the immediate environment, as well as the people occupying the buildings. For example, you know, a lot of buildings in Malaysia, if you look around, you don't have to go very far, just look around in KL alone. A lot of buildings, once upon a time, were the landmarks or ideal buildings, you know, iconic buildings, sorry, iconic buildings. But you look at the condition today, most of them have not been properly maintained. So this is why it's very nice and very easy to have very exciting building forms, but you have to maintain it, and because you're no more there as an architect, but that building stands for you, and it tells you. Because you see, I've said this once, and I'm sure you all are aware. When a doctor, a surgeon makes a mistake, the mistake is buried, you know. You get what I mean? The patient dies, you bury it. But when an architect makes a mistake, it remains there. You know? So this is the kind of awareness we must be aware, must be conscious of. And I think that is the inner undeclared qualities of an architect. You know, that he holds that responsibility, so that when he's long dead and gone, you know, I used to have a boss once upon a time. He says, you make a mistake, people will look for your grave. So, to do what? To pee on it. You know, to say, you are the guy who messed it up. So likewise here, I am just suggesting this idiom of pissing on your grave, that you have a sense of responsibility, and you want to share that responsibility now and alert the current and future generation on the need to sustain it. And this is why topics such as perpetual architecture, I never thought about it, but when it was introduced, yes, there is a need to be aware of perpetual architecture and value system.
Lilian?
Actually, I don't really think that the client is a bad guy. You have to be friends with him so that he'll let you do the things that he didn't think about. So the bad guy is really the budget, the having to work within the budget. So as you work within the budget, client usually give you space, and I encourage all of you, especially students, to remember to find that space to do. The only thing, as I said, the budget. You know, that one is something that is can't be changed perpetually. That's the enemy, and everything else, I think, can be negotiated, and it's very important, I think, for architects to start that negotiation, because the client usually just gives you very little of a brief, so there's a lot of space to work.
Those are good comments. Anyone in the audience that would like to ask questions to the people on the stage? Don't be shy. Yeah, there's one up there. Third guy on from the left, 7th row from the back. Bangun.
Boleh.
Hi, my question is for Datuk Chong Keat. It's based on my research. So I may be wrong. Based on my understanding is that, especially the shophouse area in front of Komta, it was origin of the urban configuration was drawn from a colonial rigid grid. I may be wrong, but for you growing up in Georgetown, do you see any patterns of that happening in Georgetown, or not? No.
There's a bit of a detail. Actually, we studied the whole area, and long before we did Komta, we studied the Penguin Canal, and we actually proposed a project for that. But what you can see today is an interesting lesson, because the whole approach of Komta has been spoilt by what is developed along that highway. So I think, apart from the detail of your question, what I tried to express is that what happened after a design may not be appreciated. So you may do a good design, like Lilian talks about creating the link and so on, but will it be followed up? Does the community appreciate what is good? Now, as far as the clients are concerned, you have to be lucky with a good client as against a bad client. I mean, there are certain clients who will never appoint me because they know I will not agree with them, and I will not accept their project. So you have to be in that position not to be really greedy for work. I mean, nobody asked us to design the Genting King's Park that you saw. You know, I don't know who did. So there's a difference between what you want to do as a vocation as against a profession. You want to earn your rice bowl. So you must have the integrity to decide what you can really do. In fact, architects should not design projects they're not competent and qualified to do. But the real problem facing the country in terms of national identity is the encroachment by foreign architects. Why should we recognize the Petronas Towers as a symbol here? Now, the name of Caesar Pelli. Did he really design it? Do you know what Caesar Pelli designed in America or in London? These are firms' names. So all these brand names come and they want to get a job. And that is actually the impediment to national architecture. You must give greater emphasis to the work of local architects. I'll tell you a story about SOM. Before KLCC, a flashback, we actually collaborated with Portman. But when they did the design, I actually opted out of it because it was already an imposition. SOM had a project, and they came to us to collaborate, but they only wanted us to sign the plans. And I said, I'm not going to work with you unless I really collaborate in design. Now, can you take that position? If you're only greedy to get the fees, you cannot take that position. Then I said, what you're doing, what you're proposing, is firstly bad in terms of traffic planning. They said, oh, no, don't worry, we will make sure the city council will approve us. So they're using corruption. And the fact is, in many local authorities are giving greater latitude to foreign architects to local ones. Is that true? So the local authorities must really encourage better architecture by local architects. And all of you are training to be architects, you should demand this. But many of the big projects are done by local people signing for foreign architects. I can relate the story much more in the Singapore context because we know specifically where it went wrong. So you want a national architecture, work within your means. Of course, certain special buildings can go truly international and in that sense. But I believe, as in my presentation, there's a crisis facing the world in terms of extravagance, climate change, and so on, and the difference between the rich and the poor. We must go for a more sensible answer in terms of our building and our planning.
Thank you. Any more questions before we wrap up the session? Oh, you got one more.
Hello. So my question is, when we talk about identity, there's a certain fixed image or representation attached to a certain group of people, probably as being a result of their current environment. For instance, in the case of the Bajau community, the Sea people in East Malaysia. So my question is, should this image be permanent, or are they allowed to evolve to the point of a change aesthetic or values? I'd like to address this question to AR Lilian, but the other panels are welcome to respond as well.
Thank you. Lilian?
I think every community has a very rich heritage, and it's up to the architect to choose which elements of it. So I know that you know, we've got the Bajau, the roof of our traditional vernacular buildings are usually very strong profiles for some reasons, but they are there for some reason. For instance, some of the roofs are very pitched because they are actually storage areas for grain, for rice, wheat, and start to understand why they are there, rather than look at the form. I think when we're just looking at the form and trying to emulate the form, that's a very shortcut process. You need to look at everything, you know, how they live, how they deal with the landscape, the compound. I think there's a lot of things to draw from each community, whether it's the Bajau, the Melanau, and I think the Sarawak one is, I forget what's it, also the roof for the national state, the Dun. There's a wide range of elements to draw on. I don't think, you know, in the early days, because there wasn't much, many Malaysian architects came into an environment where international modern architecture was the prevailing style. So then when the 80s came, and you know, the postmodern era, and we wanted to find a more local identity, it's actually, I think, important for architects to recognize there is a rich cultural heritage, and we don't need to be so simplistic. You can embed it in the experience of the spaces that would be in the building, not just look at the profile, the rooftop. I think we have too much of fixation on the rooftop of buildings. We need to move our attention from the skyline to the street, and through the, you know, how you walk around the building, how you walk through the building, how you experience the public space of the building, and always create a public space. Don't forget that just because it belongs to a client doesn't mean that he's not going to allow people to walk through it. For instance, even in New York, the IBM Tower is known for its garden, atrium garden on the ground floor, and everyone will go there for lunch, even though you're not working at the IBM Tower. So always look for opportunities to create something that will be shared in the community around there, and don't fixate on the crown of the building. And then important that this is for the skyline, we need to look top to bottom. So there's a lot to look at. And when you're looking at smaller buildings too, you know, every window, every door, every courtyard is also an opportunity to express elements of the heritage. It's just not to, don't take the shortcut, the easy one. Look into the finer detail of their everyday lives, not of their ceremonial life. I think we had looked too often at the ceremonial life, you know, looking at the kris, you know, and all these royal symbols. I think we should be looking at the rich everyday life of people, you know, in doing normal things. You know, batik is something worn by everybody, printed by many craftsmen. We shouldn't be just celebrating this you know, some object that is a symbol of a nation only. I think there is, I think for us it is more to recognize that culture is not high culture. Culture exists across all strata and across all aspects of life, and it's up to us to recognize it and to create, and the architect's task is to create forms that will allow people to read it and appreciate it and grow their sort of understanding of what is identity, not necessarily high identity, glorious identity, national identity, but of people.
Yeah, I got one last question to Dato Hajeedar, so that each one of you have got 2 questions already. So you will be last, then we can do the prize ceremony. Dato Hajeedar, while you were in UDA, right, 1978 to 1980, something like that, Daya Bumi was encapsulated. Daya Bumi. So I think that was the test of doing Malaysian identity, and that was the first experiment also for a collaboration between 2 big Malaysian firms, MAA and also BEP. What do you think, was it a good success in creating the Malaysian identity or Islamic identity, or what? Could you collaborate on that front? Probably that would be one of my question.
Okay, it's a loaded question because it has something to do with the DEB, the Dasar Ekonomi Baru. It's not just architecture, but the integration of the people. And in the field of architecture, for example, there was a need. If you recall, there was the reference to Bumi Putra participation within all aspects of industry and enterprise. So one of the strategy was to, because you see, prior to the May 13 incident of 1969, different areas in Kuala Lumpur were identified as ethnically dominant areas, and as such that there is some form of isolation, and because of some misunderstanding, then we create the riot was created, and subsequently as a strategy to address the problem, the new economic policy was to integrate. So one of the strategy UDA was asked to adopt was to introduce other ethnic groups to work together. For example, the practices then were mainly either non-Malays or Malays. So instead of just Malay or non-Malay, it's an integrated practice. So you will see in the case of Daya Bumi, the firm that were involved was BEP and MAA. Mio Shariman was then in UDA. He knows the people in MAA. They were all schooled in Australia, and they form a practice with Bumi Putra participation, where Mio was the Malay partner, and the others, people like Bernard and others were there. Then BEP had Kington Lu as the principal, and Zani, I think, was from City Hall, was seconded or became the partner there. And between them, the biggest project in Malaysia then, in 1974, I think, 74, yeah, 74 was the Daya Bumi. So, actually the original design was for a 60-story building, and it was reduced to about 36 stories because there were certain objections made by mainly telecoms. Actually, they felt that their what do you call microwave, passage is going to be affected. But of course, at that time, nobody really understood. The decision makers didn't quite understand that the microwave doesn't travel through buildings, you know, or get deflected. So they brought down the building. So anyway, in that practice, they were looking for identity, and one of the systems was the sunscreen. If you look at it, there was sunscreening all around the building, and in terms of the floor plans, they were developing it from the Islamic geometric design modules into the form that they had. So that's how that was created. So what it does in the meantime is that it created the flourishment of practices. There were other practices where it's not entirely all Chinese or all Malays, but there was an integration of practices. New practices were founded with interracial professionals. Yeah.
Thank you.
That's done.
Thank you very much. So with that, I would like to conclude this session of the first Putra Lecture Series, and with the roundtable discussion from Datuk Lim Chong Keat, Datuk Hajeedar, and Architect Lilian Tay. So I would like you all to give a round of applause to all of them. And as usual, I think Architect Myo would like to, Architect Zaki, to give the token of appreciation to each and every of the speakers.
Okay, for these sessions, token of appreciation, they come from ATSA architects. You know, it's a compilation of limited reprint of the sketch by ATSA. Okay. To proceed with the ceremony, I would like to invite Principal ATSA Architects Principal, Architect Azim, and his partner to deliver the token to our panels. First of all, please welcome Datuk Seri Lim Chong Keat. Terima kasih.